Based on local reports, just after 5:30 a.m. a foreign tourist begins a morning descent on Sơn Trà Peninsula, mist curling over the asphalt. He straps his helmet and checks the white motorbike, unaware the steep, narrow road will demand every careful choice he makes. The sun is barely up as he eases onto the winding road, trees closing in and visibility dropping with the morning haze. He rides steadily at first, the engine a steady hum, birds and distant waves composing a fragile soundtrack to that early hour. As the lane narrows, the curves tighten. Warning signs appear, but the mist and geometry of the road blur their urgency. He leans into a long bend, eyes on the line, the bike responding obediently beneath him, speed rising with his confidence. Traffic is sparse. A few local trucks rumble past, their wake nudging the cool mountain air across his cheeks. A shallow shoulder hides loose gravel. At one spot, runoff has left tiny pebbles where tires should grip cleanly. He crosses over a short stretch by utility pole 170, the guardrail nearby failing to give much margin for error. A gust of wind shifts his balance as the bike drifts outward, and his front tire finds a slick patch of damp gravel. In a heartbeat, the rear steps out and slides, the bike fishtailing as he fights the bars with desperate small corrections. His weight shifts, the world tilts, and the white motorbike begins an involuntary dance toward the roadside embankment and drainage ditch. The slope on the shoulder offers no forgiveness. The bike scrapes, metal grinds, and momentum throws rider and machine into uncontrolled motion. Local villagers later described a scatter of debris and a motorcycle lying near a shallow roadside ditch, helmet askew and lights still on. Bystanders run forward, voices cracking with alarm, someone dialing emergency services as others try to find a pulse or render aid. An anxious vendor retrieves a blanket while a passerby runs for help, the scene suddenly crowded with urgent small gestures. The first responders from fire rescue arrive, their boots slapping pavement as they move with practiced speed and grim determination. Paramedics work quickly, cutting clothing, stabilizing limbs, and calling for transport, while officers secure the narrow roadway. A rescue team radios for an airlift, given the remote, steep location and the seriousness of the injuries described over the channel. Neighbors and witnesses cluster at a respectful distance, faces pale, phones up, some filming with hands that tremble slightly. The narrator observes from the roadside, voice steady but low, tracing the arc of choices that led to this morning calamity. Investigators later note the bend's geometry, the absence of adequate warning signage, and the patchy drainage that scatters gravel across the shoulder. Traffic control arrives, the road closed for an accident investigation, cones and reflective tape fluttering in the mountain breeze.
A medical helicopter is requested. Rotors appear on the horizon, stirring dust and panic into a windy, noisy halo above the scene.
The stretcher is loaded carefully. Paramedics work with calm urgency as the crowd watches breathlessly and time feels suspended. He is airlifted to the nearest hospital in Da Nang, the blades cutting the dawn into a harsher, louder slice of reality. At the emergency entrance, doctors and nurses take over, the team racing against a clock no one can see but everyone feels. Monitors begin to beep steadily while surgeons prepare. Family and embassy contacts are notified as protocol unfolds in efficient motions. Officials later explain that steep grade, limited signage, and wet grit on the shoulder combined into a high-risk formula. Local press and authorities confirm that details remain under investigation, urging restraint while the facts are verified and records reviewed. Friends and fellow travelers grieve in private messages, sharing photos of a smile and a helmet now haunting in its stillness. The narrator's tone softens as he recounts how a simple decision to take a scenic route can be irrevocably costly. He reminds viewers that beautiful roads often hid violent consequences, and that thrill and caution must always be balanced deliberately. Public reaction includes calls for better maintenance, clearer signage, and more guardrail protections at dangerous points along Sơn Trà. Authorities promise to review the stretch by utility pole 170, to study drainage, signage, and whether extra barriers could have helped. Meanwhile, the local community sets temporary markers to warn morning riders, while long-term repairs are scheduled with urgency. In the days after, investigators analyze skid marks, camera footage if available, and witness statements to reconstruct the exact sequence. The family is updated respectfully as investigators compile an official report, and a cause of death is recorded after medical review. Legal and safety reviews begin, focusing on infrastructure, lighting, and whether a higher standard of maintenance would have altered the outcome. Insurance and consular assistance are coordinated, showing the bureaucratic underside that follows human tragedy across borders. The narrator pauses to reflect on how small margin errors compound when speed meets inadequate margin for correction on mountain roads. He urges riders not to assume local roads are forgiving and to adjust speed and awareness to road conditions rather than convenience. Community memorials form quietly at the roadside, flowers and small notes left where the white bike once lay, unable to continue. First responders remember the morning in somber detail, noting how every second mattered and how training met tragedy in exhausted motions. Advocates use the event to lobby for better rider education and for infrastructure audits to protect both locals and visiting riders. The narrator weaves the human element into the policy discussion, reminding listeners that regulations matter because people do. Months later, infrastructure crews resurface problematic patches, install brighter signage, and add reflective markers on the most dangerous bends. Yet the narrator warns that repairs are not enough without respect for the road and for the fragile physics under tire and pavement. Tourism operators add advisory language for scenic routes, recommending helmets, protecting clothing, and caution when visibility is limited. A small plaque eventually appears near the bend, a quiet marker of loss and a public reminder to slow down and respect limits. The narrator's voice lowers, urging viewers to internalize the lesson. Thrill is temporary. Safety is lasting and essential. Families and friends remember the person behind the helmet, with photographs and stories shared in calmer, sadder tones. Public forums debate speed limits, enforcement, and whether scenic attractions require formal visitor briefings to prevent repeats. Police reviews sometimes lead to small policy changes, extra patrols during peak tourist seasons, and improved emergency response plans. The narrator returns to the camera, voice steady, asking viewers to look at their choices on every ride and every road. Those who knew the rider speak of kindness and laughter, underscoring how any life can change in a single instant on asphalt. Local riders begin voluntary awareness campaigns, posting signs and offering tips to visitors about tricky portions of the peninsula road. Safety advocates note that helmets, protective layers, and conservative speed choices statistically reduce injury severity in single-vehicle crashes. The narrator insists that being prepared is not paranoia. It is respect for the road and for one's own life. In quieter moments, the road resumes its beauty. Families return to walks, and the peninsula, but the memory of that morning remains in the minds of those who passed the bend, and in the small roadside memorial. The narrator's final admonition is simple and direct. Treat scenic freedom with measured caution, because the road does not owe you mercy. As seasons change, local officials monitor the repaired stretch, watching for new hazards and listening to rider feedback carefully. The community's efforts to prevent another tragedy become part of a collective commitment to safer roads for everyone. And though no fix can undo the loss, action born from grief can save future lives if taken seriously. The story closes with a reminder from the narrator that infrastructure, awareness, and prudence together form the best protection for riders. He asks viewers to share the message, not to spread sensational footage, but to encourage safer choices and respect for local conditions. In small, practical terms, slow down at dawn, respect warning signs, avoid risky overtakes, and
look after one another on the road. And remember that every ride has consequences.
Final scene shows the quiet bend at sunset with a small bouquet, the road made safe, and the lesson etched into local memory. Small community meetings follow, engineers and riders trading notes about speed, signage, and simple measures that could prevent identical tragedies. Seasonal patrols increase, locals volunteer to mark hazards at dawn, and riders start checking reports before choosing scenic routes. The narrator emphasizes accountability. Road managers, riders, and tourists share responsibility. A month later, journalists return to the bend, noting patched shoulders, reflective markers, and a fresh bouquet left by strangers. The road remains beautiful but changed. The narrator asks you to ride carefully. For every